Interesting. Thank you very much, everybody. Yes, my name is Scott Badger. I am Worley's Vice President for Hydrogen sitting across this region, APAC. And I would like to welcome you to Worley's From Ambition to Reality, weaving the threads of net zero delivery, which is kind of going to sit across much of what we've heard today from previous speakers. Never in history has energy been under such scrutiny. The global pandemic, conflict in Ukraine, and increasing effects of climate change are forcing nations to contemplate the resilience of existing infrastructure, security of supply, the acceleration of low-carbon infrastructure, and decarbonisation of their energy assets, all under threat. The latest IPCC Sixth Assessment Report reinforces that the 2020s must be the decade of action on climate change. To meet the most ambitious goals of the Paris Agreement and to avert the worst impacts of global warming, we need to reduce CO2 emissions by 45% by 2030. On our current trajectory, emissions will be 30% higher than that target. Decarbonisation is not negotiable. The fate of our planet depends on it. Worley and Princeton University's Andlinger Centre for Energy and the Environment are working to examine what it will take to deliver net zero. Princeton published a study called Net Zero America at the end of 2020. It lays out 5 pathways to a low-carbon future for the United States, the world's largest economy, at a level of detail no other study has reached. None of the scenarios are projections of the future or the only way to reach net zero. They're all plausible visions of the path forward, which can guide policymakers and investors in navigating the challenge ahead. All 5 of Princeton's pathways are technically feasible and affordable, but they demand infrastructure to be built at a speed we've never attempted before. Worley recently surveyed more than 300 global executives from across the energy, chemicals, and resources sectors. 51% of respondents from the oil and gas industries ranked decarbonisation as very important to their organisation's approach to sustainability. Yet only 49% reported having implemented their decarbonisation strategies and measuring their progress. Globally, there is much discussion of what we need to do to decarbonise, but very little is being said about how we do it. Climate change has altered the expectations of all industries. Society expects us to make a positive contribution to the issue, but without making it too different from the world they already know. We must continue to deliver our products and services whilst retaining a strong social licence. How do we make these changes? Access to low-carbon sources of energy and talent are critical for companies across all sectors, and their availability often depends on operating location. The need for these is high overall and goes without saying. Access to capital scored highly across all sectors and is most important to mining and minerals and power generation and renewable energy respondents. As can be seen from this figure, the application of and adherence to decarbonisation policies only gets us so far. The private sector must change the way we do business and build assets to supplement the value of governmental policy changes and achieve our 2050 net zero targets. If net zero is to become a reality, we need to entirely reimagine how we approach big projects. Business and governments across the world must step up how they engage, design and build. If we don't, we all fail. Let's think about the US. In a middle-of-the-road Princeton scenario, the US would need to build 2 400-megawatt solar PV farms, each roughly the land area of 130 Olympic stadiums, every week for the next 30 years. A recent US project, half the size of one such solar farm, took approximately 3.5 years to deliver. Solar projects are quick to build, but this is still too long if we are to achieve net zero by mid-century. Oh, we've jumped on. We propose 5 key shifts in how to think about and approach projects. These 5 shifts don't need to be sequential, but will collectively help to identify, develop, design, and construct infrastructure through a new lens. A lens which focuses on and prioritises achievement of net zero. The 5 key shifts address the transition from economic thinking to socio-economic and environmental thinking. Tangible mindset changes in terms of digital applications, collaborative business models, and design standardization or replication, and the need to explore and develop all decarbonisation technologies rather than narrow in on the most likely technologies too early in our net zero journey. We need to make it more attractive to invest in low carbon energy than high carbon energy. Getting to net zero will need significant investment if we're going to find the capital to make it happen. Investors need to feel motivated to commit and confident that environmental and social values will be preserved. To broaden what value means, we need to strengthen human capacity. This means making the energy sector a more attractive employer, but also training people from the industries impacted by the transition in the roles needed to deliver and operate the net zero solutions. Oil refinery workers, for example, could be translated to biofuels and hydrogen production plants and hydrogen supply chains. The current energy workforce will be a huge asset, and we need to make use of their valuable experience in design and construction. We need to invest with foresight. Earmark land we'll need in the future. This includes corridors for pipelines and grid infrastructure, sites for terminals and ports. We need to identify and set aside zero carbon energy hubs, zoned for large scale development. We need to do this early to make sure we're able to access them. This way minimises project execution delays and reduces disruption to communities. Okay, where are we here? All right, we need to expect to lead from the front. The rules will dictate the change. Governments and large-scale private sector need to set ambitions, define goals, and enact legislation that creates the market forces to drive the desired low-carbon behaviours. We need to share information. We need everyone who's capable of pushing towards net zero. Governments, vendors, contractors, communities, to do so. They need to form coalitions who feel empowered to hit targets and deliver value. Value in financial terms, in job creation, and in clean environments. We need to work together. We'll be collaborating rather than competing. It'll reduce the hours we all need to work to get a design from concept to completion, and it'll increase how much gets built. We need to have a master plan. Governments and private sector will require plans that split the decarbonisation task into specific objectives. These plans need to set out net zero targets and contemplate key aspects of the transition, whilst retaining flexibility to build in new technologies that are invented along the way. These plans must include a feedback loop with key stakeholders to ensure shared value. Enabling a transparent value chain. Digital monitoring is key for building people's trust in what we're doing. It lets us make processes visible. And if people can see how things are working and the impact they're having, they'll believe in their value. We'll be able to show that projects are meeting their targets, how much carbon they've sequestered, how many jobs they've created. Throughout history, the greatest examples of innovation have been born out of necessity. These 5 key shifts combine to reframe our mindset and approach. They are some of the threads we can use to weave the net zero tapestry into reality, as are technologies we already know. Technologies on the horizon and the hundreds of coalitions and millions of individuals who will be part of making this transition happen, and it is happening. All these threads must be woven into, and shifting our thinking in line with our 5 recommendations will keep us aligned in our endeavour. If you think back to 30 years ago, 1990, either in your own life or in history, you'll realise just how quickly time goes by. The invention of the Hubble telescope, Nelson Mandela's release from prison, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the grand scale of the human race, these are all very recent events. Because 30 years isn't long. We're closer to 2050 than we are to 1990. Thank you.